Thank you so much. Thanks again, everybody, for the invitation. Thank you, Grazia. Thank you, Rob, and everybody that has been helping me. Well, as you can see, I am right here not just representing PRTSO, but Puerto Rico. I was very glad to see Aníbal Munoz also there presenting his presentation, and I'm very proud of all of you guys. Thanks for everything. Well, as you can see, my presentation is about language and communication. And I just want to share with you some of the ideas that we teachers need to actually think about when we are dealing with teaching a second language or a foreign language. Sometimes we take for granted that everybody understands what language and communication is about, but in reality, we have to explain certain concepts that actually are good for any language. So basically, as you can see in my first slide, we can define language as a set of symbols, but definitely also as a powerful tool that helps anybody increases the language and increasing knowledge. Every time we learn a new word, our brain makes new connections, new symbols. So our brain is basically like a computer. So language increases brain power, and our students need to know that. Every time they learn a word, something happens in the brain that stays there. That new connection is extremely strong, and that new symbol is never going to be forgotten if it is important for them. Other characteristics of language are basically that language is subtle, it is supposed to be delicate, it is fine, it's refined in terms of the process we follow to learn it. But definitely we cannot forget that side of language that we can call bad words. But even bad words are part of language. And I don't know if you have had that experience, but every time somebody learns a new language, usually bad words go first there. People learn bad words first. I don't know why. That could be another topic. But definitely they are part of language. Language is also dynamic. It changes. Not two people say the same thing in the same way, not even twins. I don't know if you have had this experience of going probably to the movies and then somebody asks you what was that movie about, and a person goes together with you watching that movie, and this other person explains the plot of the movie in a very different way that you explain it. So you're watching the same movie under the same circumstances, and the vocabulary you use to summarize that movie is different as the other person. A third very important characteristic is that language is social. We humans depend on it to express everything. I don't know you, but I cannot imagine living in a world without language. And when I say language, I am including body language, sign language, braille, any kind of language. It is impossible to live or survive without language. And in this part, last part of the slide, I included a line that says that language changes with age, inventions, and because of culture. You don't speak in the same way you spoke when you were 14 years old. You don't speak in the same way that you spoke probably 5 years ago. So that's why language is dynamic, language changes. Another thing that we need to explain our students, or sometimes even us, we forget these tiny characteristics of languages, the division of communication. What's communication? Well, basically, it is divided between interpersonal and intrapersonal. So, what is the interpersonal communication? Basically, the one that we have among people, having that prefix inter reminding us that it is between you and somebody else, and it is usually used for social or business purposes. Another part that we usually never talk is the intrapersonal communication. Examples of intrapersonal communication, well, basically when you talk with yourself, when you pray, when you self question, when you write letters, when you dream, when you daydream. So this happens every day at all times. But the most important part of this slide is that part that says listening is self-talk. We don't like to listen, we actually like to hear. So it is never the same to say I'm listening to you than saying I am hearing you. When you listen, some of those three things needs to happen. Either you are having internal reactions to whatever you're listening, either you're thinking about what you're listening, or you're checking for internal meaning. If none of those things are happening while you're listening, then you're not listening at all. Now, this model of the communication process has five circles in there, and there are other factors included. I'm going to explain this very in a very simple form. And basically, what we need to have once we are communicating with somebody is a sender and a receiver. We need to make sure that that sender is encoding with symbols that the receiver needs to understand or decode in order to understand. In the middle, we have a circle that says channel of transmission. We need to make sure that whenever we are communicating with somebody else, we are selecting the appropriate channel of transmission. Channel of transmission might be a face-to-face conversation. It could be this thing that we are doing right now. The important thing is that we are not having any noise, that we are able to communicate whatever we want, and that we are able to provide feedback. If we don't have all those concepts, we are never going to have a real communication process. But now I want you to take a look at the word perception. Sometimes perception is the one causing misunderstanding. So what is perception? It is the way people understand or analyze ideas. So not everybody is going to understand the same thing through, let's say, an image. And because of that, I want you to observe this. I like to use images as an example of how people perceive things. So you might use something like this in your classroom to talk about perception. And in this particular image, you can ask something as, how many living creatures do you see there? So let's take some seconds to see how many living creatures do you see. You might say 4, you might say 5. So if we analyze this, we will see the whole big picture. A guy, right? An old guy, kind of bald, and that will be one person, right? Then we have to observe the details of that image, and that image is actually made of a man on the left, a woman with a baby on the right, and a dog. So right there, taking the big picture, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 living creatures. On the corner, the right side of the corner over there, you can see a face. There are other faces in the left, some birds over there. So when you actually take a good look to the image, you'll see more than 12 living creatures. And that's actually perception. Not everybody is going to perceive those 12, 13 living creatures the first time they see an image. And we need, as teachers, to make sure our students understand that perception is very important in language and communication. It might cause a lot of misunderstandings, okay? So talking about misunderstandings, we have different barriers, okay, and they are divided in different categories. This first one is about language. And a language barrier might be something related to grammar, spelling, and punctuation. Let's say you are just sending a text message and you forgot to maybe include commas there. So just a tiny comma might be the difference between saying, I am inviting Maria, Rosa, and Carmen, to a party, not knowing if I am talking about Maria Rosa being one person or if it is Maria, comma, Rosa, comma, and Carmen. So it makes a big difference, right? In terms of semantics, if you are including a lot of unfamiliar words in a text, or maybe technical words, or even dialects like China and naranja in Spanish, people might not understand what you're saying, and that is going to cause a problem. Definitely talking about abbreviations in this last part of the slide, you see that abbreviations can cause problems. Why? Because you need to make sure that your receiver understand what you're meaning by using that abbreviation. If I tell you that I'll be teaching at USC, but I don't tell you that it is the University of South California or the University of South Carolina or even Universidad del Sagrado Corazón, you will never know where is it that I am going to be teaching. So importance of abbreviations. You need to use the whole name, the whole thing, in order to, you know, get people to understand what you're saying. I guess I am almost done in here. I see Rob. Yeah. Okay, so there are different barriers. He's telling me to cut. There are different barriers, so I'm just going to leave this presentation here so you can see that the importance of using the right communication, understanding the importance of getting to know your receiver in order for people to understand and avoid all different kinds of barriers. Rob, I think I'm done with that.